Okay, I have turned on the recording. I am welcoming everybody here to the July edition of our France and Colonies United States Zoom meetings that are on the fourth Sunday of each month, 2 o'clock Eastern time, be that daylight or standard, depending on the time of year. Before I turn this over to Loïc, who is going to talk to us today, I will let you know that next month, the fourth Sunday coincides with the Great American Stamp Show, so we will not conflict with that. We're skipping August. And instead, we will have another one in September when our esteemed speaker will be Ed Grabowski talking about fun for a penny, the 1 centime rate. So, wait a minute here. As I have done before, what I'm going to do is mute everybody. First of all, Loïc, you should be able to share your screen. Next, I will mute everybody, and Loïc, you will have to unmute yourself and take it away. All right?
Look.
Now, unmute yourself, please.
Okay.
There we go.
All right, I'm running on 2 computers, one for the audio and one for the presentation, so it's confusing at times. All right, let me share my screen and I will confirm that. Okay, we have it properly. All right, well, good afternoon to most everyone, and good morning to those of us on the West Coast. Or good evening if somebody calls from France. I'm gonna talk about the Fournier, the forgeries, and mostly from Francois Fournier, and we're gonna go through some examples from all of the colonies and focusing mostly on the group type, since that is my area of collecting and expertise. So let's get started. Okay, with a little bit of history, and that's kind of my Francois Fournier on 1 page, slide. Very kind gentleman, look like your favorite grandpa from that time. Francois Fournier presented himself as an editor of facsimile of obsolete stamps, and in his mind he was providing a great service to the collectors at the time who couldn't acquire some of the most expensive pieces, but could basically get copies, facsimiles, fakes, from him at a much lower price. He really dominated the market for forgeries from 1900 to 1914, just the beginning of the First World War. Some 15 years of a very flourishing business, producing up to 800, sets of stamps, covering 3,500 different stamps from many countries, over the world. And basically, he had those kind of catalogs where he would, promote his business, and those kind of sales catalog, those order forms would grow over time from 18 pages to 64 pages in 1914. I think that last catalog is something that some collectors are looking for, because it gives a great list of what Fournier had put on the market in terms of forgeries. And from what I understand at the time, that that gentleman had, some 10,000 regular customers, and even he has like sales, persons, representatives in 23 countries. So quite a big, business at the time. He also ran a philatelic clinic for some years with up to five experts, that could basically make any kind of, repair and alterations to your stamps. A damaged genuine stamp, something that needed, little hole to be fixed, some color to be fixed, something he could basically fix all of that. and he had some 2,500 clients, including some well-known, stamp dealers at the time. So came World War I, which put an end to his activities. After the war, one of his associates, Charles Hirschberger, tried to take over the business. Wasn't very successful. And came 1927, where the Union Philatelic de Genève acquired the stock of everything that was remaining from the Fournier's, operations and Hirschberger, and they pretty much destroyed everything, but also put together 480 reference albums. And I'm indicating here that most of those are different. I will explain why in a moment. And they sold them at the time for £5 to qualified buyers. What was a qualified buyer at the time? It was mostly a philatelic association, an expert, maybe library, where they would be able to use those albums for really, reference material when they were trying to maybe authenticate stamps, and they would say, okay, this is a fake. That might be a real one. All right. So what are we going to talk about today before I move on? So when I think when the Union Philatelique de Genève acquired the stock, they had several boxes of stamps and paper and equipment. They had printing presses, the perforating machines and presses, a lot of small material. The equipment was handed over to, I believe, the Postal Museum in Bern in Switzerland. And then those albums were made basically to recover the cost of the purchase of that inventory from Fournier, though the Union Philatelique would not be out of money. And that was probably one of their biggest achievement, with some maybe not so great consequences. I don't know. We can discuss that. So what we'll go around, about today, look at the business, what I call the flourishing business for Mr. Fournier. Look at what the UPG, the Union Philatelique de Genève, had put together with this album of facsimile. Look at what you find today on the market. Fournier forgeries are plentiful. And then just a quick, tips to spot and recognize those forgeries for the uneducated collector, buyer beware. So talking about the business, I mean, you can see on this copy from the front page of the facsimile, from one of the pages. Facsimile was the mail order form or catalog that Fournier was shipping out to his clients. Very successful business, long established company, founded 1891 by Mercier in Geneva. At the time, he was very much welcome in philatelic circles. Actually, his product got multiple medals at stamp exhibits in Europe, and things kind of turned around 1905. Okay, but he was a very, very good salesperson. The material he had, all of his catalogs were, communication were sent out in French, in English, in German. Those languages were relatively good. I think he had also some communication in Spanish and a few other languages, where the translation were more or less, accurate. But he was pretty much able to supply any stamp that somebody at the time would have had on their, want list. And of course, the philatelic clinic as well, to repair, damaged stamps, was also pretty good, had a good success with most, philatelists who wanted nice quality stamps in their collections. After 1905, as I said, those things got a little bit more complicated. What happened is that people who had purchased those stamps, knowing they were fake, then some of those collections started to be resold, and even dealers started to resell some of the stamps from Fournier, without mentioning that they were actually facsimiles or fakes, and they sold them as authentic on the second-hand market, and that was a little bit of a scandal. That's when basically Fournier was no longer welcome at stamp exhibit or in philatelic circles, and when he started to really move along with his mail order, kind of catalog in order to continue the business. Okay, that's where he had those 10,000 subscribers, and that was really pretty successful. Though the facsimile was born at that time. Facsimile is his catalog. This is a view of one of the covers from October 1910. You could subscribe to it, but I think most of those were distributed oftentimes, gratis, no fee to philatelic societies across the world. They printed something like 25,000 copies of the facsimile to basically send them out to collectors and interested parties. You can see here on the left a little postcard to someone in Germany. It's written in German, where basically the message says, I have the honor to inform you that since the publication of my last price list, I have published a number of novelties which have met with great success. And I ask that you send me your wish list without any obligation to purchase, and hoping that you will take advantage of these advantageous, offer to subscribe. So really, good, good marketing practices. And of course, he also mentioned, the philatelic clinic, philatelic clinic here. You see here another letter sent to Aurora, Illinois, in 1914, and you can see he was, presenting himself as an editor d'art, so he really was in the business of doing nice little things that were, art more than it was not trying. He was never really trying to steal from the postal service. That was not his thing, but he was just, making nice little art piece in the shape of a stamp. If we move on here with more of the, letter mail related to Francois Fournier. Another one here to Mr. Flaxcomb in St. Louis, Missouri. Some of you might remember or know that person, who I believe was the owner of the Standard Stamp Company in St. Louis. And is more well known for some of the forgeries he made of the 1872 issues of Mexico. But he was obviously, a client or a correspondent of Mr. Fournier. Another letter to Sample, Minnesota here, as well, same period, in, I guess, 1913. Here we can see from the successor, from Hirschberger, Nachfolger, so that's successor in German, we're sending a little postcard to a client in Germany, indicating them that their stamp is ready, and the cost of the repair will be 38 francs. At the time, they would charge, I think, 1.50 franc for stamp with a low catalog value, and 10% of the value of the of catalog for a more expensive stamp. So I would say that stamp probably was 380 francs at the time, which is probably a good piece. I don't know what it was, but that tells you a pretty expensive stamp was being repaired and sent back to the client upon payment. And this is really, I expect this amount to be immediately spent, and thank you in advance. And so here we go. So if you want to know what this kind of list of prices looked like, here is one of them. I'm sorry, it looks very small. I put like 4 pages on one slide, but basically this is a list for the first choice stamps that Fournier was putting on the market. And you can see that the list of countries goes from basically, Afrique Orientale Anglaise, okay, so the East British Africa, to Württemberg, Venezuela. So pretty much all of the countries you can think of at the time that had stamps on the market are listed. France, of course, with quite a few. There is not that many of the French colonies. There is like a few stamps here from 71, 84, 92, the postage due tax, and then some others. And Fournier was also quite smart, because if a stamp existed with some variety like tête bêche, he would actually reproduce those as well. So you could acquire the tête bêche variety, not just the one stamp, and that's probably quite interesting for some of the stamp collectors at the time who might not have been able, financially to afford one of those, rare stamps. So this was then the first choice, list. But Fournier also had, and if you look at this, let's say quite closely, I mean, he sold, the entire series. In sometimes, you have multiple stamps here, 10 stamps from 1 to 30 kreuzer from Baden for 5 francs. Sometimes you have, I don't know, 15 stamps here from France. If you look at the postage due series from the 1 centime to 5 francs, you would have paid 4 francs at the time for this series. And altogether, that represented something like 305 different designs, but effectively, potentially thousands of stamps, okay, with the series. In parallel to that, we also had list of second choice that were available, not necessarily the same stamps, but probably things that were not as well made, but were also available, not as sought after. The prices are slightly less. And then you finally had a list of overprints, because you could perfectly, if you wanted to, send to Mr. Fournier one of your authentic stamps and have it overprinted with an interesting and hard to find overprint. He would do this totally happy to help the collector, and he would also just print some of his fake stamps, overprint them with those overprints to get the varieties available for those who were interested in those. And here as well, you can see we have quite a long list. I've just put 2 of the pages, but there were way more than that. I mean, as I said earlier, at the largest of his operation, that catalog had 64 pages. So you can imagine how many stamps that was. Right. I mean, at that level, we have probably 800 different, kind of types that are available for sale, which probably at the time would have, you might not have been able to fill a complete, Schaubeck album, but not far from it, with some of the most, the rarest stamps on the market. So the business was flourishing, the war came, then things were not so nice, and Fournier being dead, the stamps still were being sold a little bit on the market, and then the Union Philatelique de Genève decided to do something, and they kind of, decided to purchase and destroy the entire stock of stamps that were left with Hirschberger. And they didn't destroy everything. They created those 480, kind of reference albums that they put on sale. That was really, I think, a great thing. It might have come a little bit late, because the number of stamps from Fournier on the market, the quantity is mind-boggling even today. But a lot of people were quite happy about this undertaking. You can see here, in the album, on the first few pages, they included some of the letters received from different philatelic organizations here, from Mr. Melville, president of the Junior Philatelic Society in London, with basically, as for the experts, they will know how to appreciate and value the important records of philatelic perfidy revealed and laid bare in the Fournier albums, on which the Philatelic Union of Geneva is expending such care. So that was a very well received at the time, undertaking. I think those albums sold relatively easily. Different allotments were made for each country, pretty much, of those albums. And as you all know, probably, I mean, some of them remain, intact today. I think the, Union Philatelique of Geneva has 6 of them in their collection, that they expose, they exhibit here and there. But a lot of those albums have been basically, cut and divided into country pages for, for collectors. That is a little bit of a, I like things that are not cut into pieces, so that's a little bit disappointing to me. But those albums today sell for a pretty penny. You would probably have to fork not the £5 from 1927, but closer to a few $1,000 or euros to get one of those, if it's complete. In the first few pages, they presented some of the material that Fournier was using. That's very, very good to know what kind of equipment was available at the time. So you have the printing press for the stamps, the printing press for the overprint. Here you have the combs that were used to perforate the sheets of stamps. Here's the machine used for the perforation. You have different embossing, machine here, press, some different samples and like reproduction of some of the steel plates or I guess more copper plates here for stamp. You see some of the obliteration, Monxe and Paco, backwards here, or reverse, and then you have some of the sample of overprint, service postage probably for India. This one I don't know what it would be, but and some of the other obliteration with cork or wooden markers. So all of those things were pictures were made and they were referenced in those albums, which is quite interesting. Here's some more of that. You can see also some of the steel plates here with some of the engraved stamps, some of the hand materials that were used for diverse perforations and things like that. That could be made. Sample of the perforation, the tags for postage date stamps from Tunisia with the T with dots, the grills from the US. So a lot of really Fournier could do pretty much anything. If it existed at the time, if that stamp had been printed, if it was some specific way of creating the stamp, he pretty much had the material and the equipment to reproduce that stamp relatively closely. Okay, there was always differences, but if all you wanted were to fill some gaps in your collection, those were probably a pretty good way to do that. So to look at some numbers, the L'Union Philatelic of Geneva then got about 400 kilos of stamps. That's heavy. If you ever purchase a box of stamps of 20 kilos, that's a lot of material. So 400 kilos is big. Okay, a good part of the stamps were damaged. They were stuck together because of humidity, and basically they didn't try to separate them. They just burn it off, and then they cataloged the remaining stock. Everything that was useful, that could have been sold, that was in good condition. And any one of you would venture, to guess what would have been if they had applied the Hiver Atelier, pricing from the 1928 catalog to the stamps. What would be the amount of the value of that inventory? Anybody wants to guess? Wild idea? You would have to unmute yourself. No takers? But I can tell you. Okay, this is what they got to. There's about 2.8 billion, francs at the time. So that's a big number. And I was trying to figure out, okay, what does that mean really? And I think for me, the best way to make a little bit of a realization is to compare it to something that probably most of you have heard of or are familiar with, which was the Ferrari collection that was sold at auction in France between 1921 and 1925, so a few years before that undertaking from the Union Philatelic of Geneva. And that was probably the biggest sale ever in a way. And that's that series of auctions over 4 years brought in about, I think, 26.5 million francs, okay, less than 30 million. And Fournier would have had in his inventory at the time, 2.8 billion. So I'm going to say, probably the Ferrari collection kind of, drove the catalog prices for most of the stamps that were sold in the following years. So I'm pretty sure that the Philatelic catalog in 1928 took the prices from the Ferrari sale in consideration in order to create their own pricing on their catalog. And if you apply this to the Fournier, inventory, you get that number that is 100 times bigger. And that was just the remaining inventory after they had destroyed everything that was in bad shape. And that was years after Fournier was dead, and that was after Fournier had 15 years in business with a lot of activity. Okay, which gives you an idea, probably if you need it, of the amount of blue stamps that still exist in collections today. Okay, they're still in the in albums and stock books everywhere. So what the UPG did was to create those 480 albums. Okay, so they had over 86,000 special sheet of paper made for those albums. They used for those albums over 1,200,000 stamps that were cut, put in block, unit, whatever, and stuck in pieces, on a strip or a block in different frames. And they used some of the students from the University of Geneva to basically, do all of the obliterations that they could put in the catalogs in the album for reference. Okay, and as well as you had like 273,000, cancellations have been made, and they also printed, or reprinted almost 250,000 overprints, also for those albums. So it was a significant amount of work. It took them, I think, a couple of years to get all of that completed. So let's go into the stamps now. So we're going to go through basically, scans of the pages that are dedicated to the French colonies. On the left here, you have a list of all of the stamps that were included. So we will see there are some eagles, some of the Alfred Dubois. We have the postage due stamp from Duval. We will see the French Congo, colis postaux for parcels. Some blocks from Diego Suarez, Réunion, the first stamp, the postage due stamps, some of Gabon, a few proofs as well from Côte de Somalie and Obok. When the UPG didn't have the actual stamps, but they had the photographic, if you want, in some way, kind of, they basically reprinted them or created some proof to say, hey, this is what we had that could have been made, but we didn't have actual stamp from it. And then some of the sample cancellation, and then some of the sample overprints as well. So here you have the eagles and the Alfred Dubois in a very nice block of 12. Totally nothing that would have existed, but if you wanted to basically go and cut those stamps and sell them, or perforate them and sell them, that was a nice way to get it done. You can notice that little, I don't know if it comes out very, very visible, but those are the mark on the papers that the UPG used in order to indicate that those were reproductions or facsimile or fakes, because those stamps are not, those clichés are not marked on the front of the stamps. So we go for the eagle and the Alfred Dubois. Let's move into more of the Alfred Dubois in different colors, in perf blocks, perforated, and this time you can see the little faux, hand stamp on the front of the stamps to make sure that those will not be resold later on as original or authentic stamps. Here goes the postage due stamps from 1894, 84, 92. Really, really neat quality. Congo Français. And as I mentioned before, if there was, you can see it here, a tête bêche in the sheet, then it would have been made as well. So you could get the full sheet or just that pair with the variety. the first few stamps from Diego Suarez, those are plentiful, and a lot of them on the market are fake and probably come from our friend Mr. Fournier. Same with Réunion, the early stamps from Réunion. And really, it's I think for us this is great reference material, because everybody, if we collect French colonies, we have some of those stamps in our collections, and we might not have sent them for to get authenticated or certified, and so at least we can try a little bit with that material to compare and see, okay, well, is it likely a fake or likely actually an authentic one? There are different ways for us to do that. So some of the colored Gabon one here, we start with some of the small, some of the obliterations, some of the cancels, some of the overprints that existed as well. Here are some of the reproductions from some of the stamps that, they could basically show some of those pictures, but not have the actual stamps. That was probably something that Fournier used as reference when he created the stamps himself. Here we move with some of the pages with the obliteration. So you have Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, Île aux Chiens, one of the small, one of the smallest post office in Saint-Pierre and Miquelon. Some of La Réunion, Saint-Pierre, Martinique, Nosy-Be, Pondichéry, Obock, etc., etc. Some of the from Tonkin, Annam, the Saint-Louis à Dakar from Senegal for the train. So really a lot of different cancels were available. Some of the overprint from Annam and Tonkin as well. More obliteration that might be repeat, because we had a Namdin here from the 1st of October, and we have against Namdin here on 1st of October. Some of those pages have been, you can notice, I reassembled some pages that were cut in pieces, because not everything was always about French colony. You can see here Colonie Allemande, or somebody might have cut the bottom of that page because they wanted to just sell the piece about French colonies, and they sold the German colony to another collector. So you even find today a lot of only part of a page instead of an entire page that are typically sold on eBay. Some of the overprints. So again, if a colony overprinted their stamps, most likely you're going to find it here. All of the New Caledonia, Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, Nosy-Be, everything, all the postage due stamps, overprint, from Senegal, Réunion again, Benin, Diego Suarez, Martinique, Indochina with the colis postaux, for example. So all of those exist. Fournier would have perfectly taken one of the normal, Alphée Dubois stamps, whatever it was, and placed that overprint on top of it, making it in one of the new, pieces in the catalog. So when I mentioned earlier that those albums were all different, okay, most of it was really, manual work. So you imagine those poor students, like they were separating stamps and putting them on the frame, on the different, frame where they needed to go, and they were like doing their cancellation on a page. And you can see here, for example, we have like 24 different obliterations. Most of them are the same in both pages, but they're not in the same order. With Cayenne in Guyane is the same, but then we have Nosy-Be, Madagascar here, and then we have Pointe-à-Pitre here. Here we have Cayenne, Pointe-à-Pitre, and then Nosy-Be. So you can see there's a little bit of a change simply because of the way those were done, and the students, didn't really care so much about making them all identical. That was probably too much to ask. And so here they might have been done at a different time, but they have those 24 canceled, 24, that they needed to put on a page, and they did that. And you can see different stamps from different colonies, different values. So the original, and I would say, even when you say, when it shows on the catalog, 1892, that's probably not necessarily the case. Yes, most of those are from that period. That's fine. Some of the overprint later and other different overprints, all of those are group type. This one is not. That's Peace and Commerce from, I guess, what, Port Said. But though you had, out of the, over 170 pages that cover from the Azore to Zululand, really, you have quite a few pages that are dedicated to French colonies, and 4 of them are mostly about the group type. And so there are different, pages and different individual colonies that are covered as well. Alain Tonquin, French Congo, Diego Suarez, and we saw some of those pages earlier. But that was really quite a big undertaking by the UPG to put those albums together. So, and they're really nice pieces today. Some other examples. Here goes a block, quite original one. You have all the different colonies from Anjouan, Gulf de Benin, because they had 2 of them at different times. Same with Diego Suarez, and then we go to the end with French Sudan. So there are 6 times 5, 30, figurine. The last 2 are the same, so French Sudan, Sudan Français, because only 29 colonies got the stamps, and instead of having something in blank, Fournier put the same one twice. But to my knowledge, he never really made any kind of, first, those blocks of 30 stamps have no relation to reality in any way, because the actual sheets of stamps were 25-25, printed at Latitude du Temps in Paris. So I'm not so sure why he did this one this way. That was probably a proof for him to check the quality of the legends and all the names and things like that, because there was no reason at all to print a block of 30 stamps for the stamp market. That would have been, unless you would basically cut them in 2 pieces after perforating them. Some more of the stamps. You can see here some of the samples from Anjouan with the obliteration, the octagonal one from Anjouan, Colonie Française. Some of the postage distance from Guadeloupe. Some more of the group type. The colors are quite typical. They're really bright on those spec stamps, especially on it's really different, I found, from the original on the 40 cents, 50 cents or something. Some of the overprint, some of the cancels that you can find, and I would say not necessarily it's a 100% guarantee, but if any of your stamps has one of those dates on it with the same cancel, most likely it's a fake. Of course, it might be that stamp was canceled, really by the local post office that same day, but yeah, a very good-looking, sock on nose cancel might be a fake. Because they say, in my view, most of the stamps that Fournier canceled, he would cancel them at the intersection of the 4 stamps. And so you oftentimes find, bits and pieces of the cancellation of the on all 4 corners, but you don't have a nicely socked on nose cancel. But to be taken with a grain of salt as well. The same block that I was just talking about, but this time not marked. There is no faux, label anywhere on that block. It's one that I purchased from our friend Ed some time ago. It's a beautiful piece. I love it. It's a total fake, I know, but it's still beautiful. And so again, as I said, they're for me quite original and exceptional, because there was no such thing as a 6 times 5, 6 column and 5 rows. It was all 5 by 5, and then another 5 by 5 next to it with a with a bridge in between. So that's the way those things look. In any case, Fournier really only, when we'll see those a little bit later, but he printed mostly for the group type blocks of 25. And I think that's probably one reason why we don't find any millésime from Fournier because he didn't have a full sheet of 50 with the bridge in the middle and the millésime between, you know, position 15 and 16. So there is no, if you have millésime from the group type, most likely those can be Fournier because Fournier never made them. So this is one of the most beautiful pieces, I think, from Fournier, that obviously didn't come from one of the albums. So that is something that was probably sold to a collector, you know, before then, because it's not marked, you know, fake on top. So, which doesn't mean it's real or authentic. It's actually the same as the one from the prior page, just not being overstamped fake. So enough with the reference albums. Let's look at what's today on the market in terms of Fournier. And I looked some time ago on some of the offers on eBay and Delcamp. And if you search for Fournier on those, you know, auction sites, you're gonna have thousands of items, you know, listed. So some of them have nothing to do with Fournier because there is, I guess, a couple of stamps that are related to a French writer, you know, Henri-Alain Fournier, who wrote Le Grand Monde, for example, and there is also a French dermatologist, Alfred Fournier. So those people are on the French stamp. So there might be some entries that are corresponding to those people, but you still have quite a lot of different things, and they go for a good price. They're fake, but they go for almost oftentimes, you know, what you would actually pay for the real thing with a Parisian dealer, which makes no sense to me. But maybe there is today, you know, fake stamps are collectible as well as the real one. Who knows? That makes no sense to me, but that's what it looks like. And some of those fake stamps are really original. I've taken this one here and I put it big because you can see, I mean, I have no idea how a stamp from Saint-Pierre et Miquelon would have found itself in New Caledonia and be overprinted for the cinquantenaire of New Caledonia. That's technically, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. So this is really a fake. It's a Fournier. Why did he print something like that? I have no idea. That makes no sense to me. It's quite original and it's available for $350, which is quite good. Probably way too much for a fake stamp, but it is at least announced in multiple languages as fake. So we're going to at least give that to the seller. The price is totally crazy, but you can find some really interesting pieces. And let's take a look at some of them. So the famous block of 25 that I mentioned earlier, that's the standard size of the block of stamps that Fournier was selling. And you notice very clearly, you know, one of the key differences with the real one, the authentic one, which is the badly aligned perforations between, you know, the horizontal line and the vertical perforation. Of course, they're not always that bad. If you look at this one here, it really doesn't look too bad, but obviously some of the here are pretty bad. And this is basically a result of the fact that, you know, those were perforated in line instead of using the you know, U-shaped comb that was used for the real one, which gives the exact same you know, the exact same perforations for every row, since the comb will go up, the sheet will advance, the comb goes down, perforate a U again and again and again, you know. And so anywhere you see a bad angle with the perforations, that's indicative of a fake. Those stamps, like those blocks, sell for, I don't know, a little bit less than $50 on eBay today. Still a good amount for fakes, okay? But they're colorful. We can probably say that. Some unperforated stamps. which is quite original here as well. No legend. You notice some of the cancel on the four corners. There is absolutely no reason why any kind of those stamps would have been canceled, though this is or sold. The legend, the country is missing, but that collection exists. Probably, it's also another block that was cut because we found two versions of the 45, one canceled, one fresh. And some of the cancels you can see, there is a Saint-Pierre, probably, I don't know, Martinique, Saint-Pierre, Miquelon. This one is a Tamatave from Madagascar. You have a Soudan Français. You see the AN and from here. So different, this is probably a Miquelon, another Français or Soudan Français, probably. So this is quite original. I know that, I don't know who owns it. It's nice for the group specialist. It's definitely an interesting piece, even if they're fake. Some of those weird stamp with perforation mistakes, and then I actually purchased those on Delcomp some time ago. Not too expensive, like, I don't know, 10 euros, maybe something like that, 10, 20 euros. I couldn't determine from the picture if they were real or not. I wanted to take a second look. So I sent them to my friend Stéphane Buchet in Paris, and he looked at them and said, "Oh, those are Fournier, definitely." I was doing some research on perforation, varieties of on the group type. So I wanted to take a second look at those. This one is still available, I think, for sale, about like maybe 35 or 40 euros. And this one is part of a lot that goes for much more than that. And the Fournier was careful, but sometimes it basically, misplaced the perforating comb, and then he had to, probably did this first one, and then, oh, darn, it's not right. So let's do another one. So whenever you see the stamps, anything like this is typical as well of a mistake by Mr. Fournier and his perforating machines. But that makes for some original stamps as well, definitely. We don't just have stamps. We also find them, on cover. This one, it's not maybe necessarily so visible, but the 25 cent is a Fournier for sure. It's a little bit harder. I don't have a better scan of it, so it's hard to say. And I would have to go and double check the Anjouan Colonie Française if it matches the date from Fournier, but this is definitely a fake. The 30 cents, of course, doesn't correspond to a typical or a valid, postage rate at the time. So that's probably something that might have been done later on with using some of the fake stamp from Fournier, that somebody had and decided to create a little bit of a kind of a cover with fully reproduced cancel from Anjouan. I'm not gonna venture or say that this was done by Fournier. Probably not. Done much later by somebody who tried to resell some fake stamps on the cover to give them some legitimacy. Here goes another one with hard to say, because again, here's the scan I have. It's bad quality, but I totally 63 cents for postage amount doesn't reflect anything that seems valid to me. The cancel look fishy to me as well. The color of the stamp is not the right one in my opinion. And it's hard to say, but some of the detail of the printing make me think those stamps are Fournier. Obviously, that cover would have been, made or created, much later, because I can't imagine Fournier stamping, 1939 on obliterating 1939 when he was really dead for almost a good over 20 years. So that that was done later, but using some of the Fournier stamps as well. Interestingly, if it was a real letter, if it wasn't a fake, it will probably be the latest usage of the group type on cover. The latest I know of is 1938 from Madagascar, on some with another few stamps, in mixed postage, but that's using some of the group type, the overprint, the 1 franc overprint, I think over 5 franc. And that's a late usage. This would be even later, but it's a fake. I think I have a third sample here. This one from Indochine, from mail in Canton. There is an overprint Canton on the stamp as well. But the problem with this one, I mean, the stamps is not necessarily so easy to determine it's a fake or the cancel. You might ask yourself some questions, but the date here, the 18 August 1904, really doesn't match any of the journey made by the Salazie from Yokohama to Marseille. Okay, that ship that effectively worked on the line and made 2 return trips from Yokohama to Marseille in 1904, one from April 8 to May 17, and another one from October 7 to November 16. The date of passage of the ships were pretty well known, so nobody would have put, first steamer Salazie in August. That makes no sense whatsoever. They would have known that ship had sailed already 3 months ago and will not come for another 3 months easily or more. So this is another fabrication. A nice try though. And there is, of course, some forgeries that don't even try and to leave you with any doubt that this is a forgery. The stamp itself is obviously the fake. What's beautiful that, I mean, nobody would put 1 franc on a postcard and mail it, though that's maybe for, a faux pour servir and have a good looking piece in the collection. But having a stamp from Diego Suarez, and this is the second series of the group type. Okay, the first one was Diego Suarez and Dependencies. So this one only probably came late in 1893. So having the dead stamp, from the 18th of January 92 is fantastic. I mean, the stamps, even the first series of the stamp were not even issued at that time. All of us know very well that the earlier, cancellation that we know of on group type stamps are from Obok in the 11th of December of 1892, when the stamps first were dispatched and appeared in the market for postage. And finally, this is a view of the military hospital of Saint-Claude in Guadeloupe. Not much to do with Diego Suarez, but hey, somebody might have been traveling and was in Guadeloupe at some time and landed at one point later in Diego Suarez and decided to use one of his old postcards. And there's nothing here that says really it's Guadeloupe. You have to know your geography. But Saint-Claude, Le Massif de la Soufrière, most people that are interested in the French colonies would know that this is not in Diego Suarez. No, this is an interesting piece. Makes me laugh every time I look at it. I have this one in my collection. So it's a fun one. So when we talk about, authentic or fake, it's a little bit like, those games where you compare 2 pictures and you try to find, okay, do they match or not? And obviously we mentioned already, the perforation in the corners, that in the authentic one, they're always, nicely made. On Fournier, they often don't match. The top of the pole is more rounded because of the plates were damaged a little bit, so it's the top of the pole is typically rounded on the real one, and it's a nice triangular shape on the fake one. You can always try to look at some of the Col.Fra, design, not as well made on the fake one. There is it's easier to look at today if you can, scan those stamps at a high res and blow them up. But it will take a long time for me to scan every single group stamp I have and compare them to make sure that all of them are authentic or not, but I might do that for the higher values. The design of the hands is a little bit not so clean on the Fournier. The background, white dots as well is not so clean. The shade under the feet of I guess the commerce god here is not as well made. It's like dark, stain. So all of those things, here you can see in this corner, there's like a dark triangle that doesn't really exist here. So a lot of little differences. I would not say that, the centering of the legend is a good indication, because there are a lot of authentic stamps where the legend is badly centered as well. In this case, this is well pretty neat for the authentic one, and it's a little bit to the left for the fake one. Colors, it's difficult to say if all you have, is a scan, but if you have a real stamp and a fake one side by side, it's probably a little bit easier to make a determination that one is real, one is fake. There is as well in the philatelic literature, you will find a lot of articles in English, French around those fake stamps. Some of them are quite old, so it's not like this is something new that people didn't have way of knowing about. All of those have been well documented. So I think collectors need to be aware. I don't know if the other countries have had so much study as well, but I know for the group type there is a lot of information available that has been published in the FCP and the Col.Fra bulletin as well. So there is definitely ways for us to know what's fake and what's authentic. And finally, so if you want to take another look, the full album is available online. No longer, I mean, it's on the web archive, so you can actually go and find it, and you will have not only the French colonies but every other country. Of course, I would say if you can get one, and I'm going to thank Head for selling me one of his copies. The Fournier album of Philatelic Forgeries from Ractas is a really nice document to have, very very well made. Some other articles have been written by multiple philatelists over the years. You find a lot of stuff on the web. Presentation at stamp clubs like we do today. And I actually found as well a lot of material in other language than French or English, which is, if we needed it, another reminder that Fournier was really inundating the world with some of his forgeries, and you find them in all countries because he made them for everyone. And so that's another little reminder that he was a very prolific forger, and there is a lot of material still around. I think I saw not so long ago at one of the auctions in the US, a large lot of French colony went for, I'm going to say, like $10,000. And I was looking at the lot, and I'm going to say, my opinion, the third or half of the group type stamps in that lot were Fournier. And that is sad for whoever bought it, and maybe somebody bought it knowingly and is going to try to resell them as such. But there was some stamp I wouldn't be able to say they were Fournier, because I'm not such a specialist of other French colonies outside of the group type. But when I see a huge amount of forgeries in a lot, that gives me some suspicion for the rest of the lot. That's what I'm going to say here. And I think that's about it. Yes. We're done with that presentation. And Ken, I sent you earlier a PDF of it, so if you would have the recording, and you can also post it if you want.
I thank you. And yes,
we can have questions.
We create a PDF and put that on the site in addition to the recording.
Yeah.
So, questions?
Yes. Did Fournier do any forgeries of the Sage series in that same time period?
Probably. I would have to check.
I didn't see it on the list that you showed.
We can check.
Ed Grabowski here.
Ed might know.
No, I don't actually, but I still have some comments. Once I was looking for cancellations on Colonies general issues, and it was the 1 franc type Sage and had a beautiful Tahiti cancel. But when I looked closely at the stamp was fake. It wasn't a type Sage. You know, there were differences from a normal type Sage. And I had never seen a type Sage forgery before. I was pretty well into collecting. And in those days, Herbie Bloch used to come regularly to the French Colonies Philatelic Society meetings. So I mentioned it to him, and the following meeting, he came in with 2 stock cards of type Sage forgeries. Okay, so Herbie Bloch had loads of them in his fakes collection, but I just have never seen a lot of type Sage forgeries.
Yeah, I'm looking at the
Regat's book.
Yeah, and I see some Ceres, I see some Napoleon, I see some Summers, some of them. No Sage on those pages. So maybe not from Fournier, but as Ed said, somebody else meant it.
So somebody made a lot of type Sage, and they were in the Herbie Bloch fake collection, reference collection.
Yeah.
I just like to make a couple of comments, 2 issues that I've had a personal involvement. Loïc mentioned the imperforate group type stamps. These were actually brought to my attention by a member of the French Colonies group, and he sent me scans, and the ones Loïc showed came from him. It's published in the Philatelist. I don't remember his name. So if you search back and I don't know, maybe 20 years ago in the Philatelists, you should find that note with those copies, and that'll give his name. But those are the only imperforate, unlegended, if you can use that word, group types that I've seen. The other thing I'd like to say, and this I really had an involvement in, before we started today, a couple of people were holding up the 1984 article that I did with Bob Stone, or Bob Stone did with me. He was the senior author. But in that article, I discussed the history of the 2 5x5 sheets that Loïc showed. And I also reported this it's in that article. Maybe I've reported it in the Philatelist also, but it's worth mentioning here because it brings up an issue. I was a member in the 1970s, member and president of the Merck Stamp Club. That's Merck and Company, the pharmaceutical company in New Jersey for whom I worked. And someplace in the 70s, we bought a collection from a deceased member's family. It was a box, cardboard box. We probably paid about $3,500 for it, which is a lot of money then. And it had a lot of US stuff. And at the bottom of this box were a stack of those 5x5 Fournier forgeries. I would say about 1.5 inches thick, maybe 2 inches thick. There were a lot of them. And the word we got on those forgeries is that they were involved in some litigation by a stamp dealer in Syracuse in the 1930s, who was somehow related to the member we bought them to. And that's all the information we had. And so here we were, a stamp club stuck with all these sheets. We had about 40 members at the time. And the question was what to do with them. And we finally decided, and I did this as president, we tore them into five stamp strips. And we gave everybody 20 examples from as many colonies as possible of the strips. Every member got them. And we had a special hand stamp made at the local print shop that not only said faux, but it says fake. It says faux and fake. So if you ever see a group type with the double faux fake hand stamp, that comes from the Merck collection. At the end of my presidency, there was still some stuff left over, miscellaneous sizes of blocks and stuff. And we sold that through Roger Kerber in Detroit. And that brought $500, actually. I was very, very pleased with that. And I thought I was done with the Fourniers, but then another member of the Merck Club, who was a good friend of the first member, whose collection we bought, he said he managed to get about 25 of those 5x5 sheets away before they were taken up by the Merck Stamp Club. And he still had them, and would I want them? And so I paid him a reasonable price back then for the sheets. And so when you see a 5x5 sheet, those are coming from this original collection that the Merck Club bought, that a second member was able to garner and keep aside, that I bought. I've sold most of them on eBay over the years. And I think maybe I have one or two more, and that's it. So just a couple of additions to the Fournier story where I've had a thumb in it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ed. John Hollister, go ahead.
A lot of the online sources on the group type forgeries attributing them to Hirschberger rather than Fournier. I'm thinking of the Wikipedia site, and I'm wondering what the full story is there. I'm assuming it was just somebody ran with it on Wikipedia, but I'm just wondering. We could flesh the Hirschberger story out and maybe correct some misconceptions.
Yeah, that could be possible. I don't know. I would have to research more on that. Definitely, I mean, Fournier was working way after those stamps first appeared, so he might have made some, definitely. Hirschberger as well, eventually later on. From what I understand, Hirschberger was nowhere as successful as Fournier with the business. Yeah, that's a valid point. Some more research to do. Yeah.
Okay.
But it is true as well that all of those catalogs from the Philatelic de Genève have a ton of those group type, and they're still all presented as Fournier forgeries. So
If the Saran guide describes a forgery as faux de Genève, is that always Fournier?
yeah, I don't
Anybody
know.
else?
I don't know. Ed, would you know if what's called the faux de Genève, those are the Fournier? I mean, I don't know if there was only that one forger in Geneva. He was certainly the most prolific one.
Yeah, no, I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, I will have to look at some of the other, kind of reference material about forgers. There are quite a few books that have been written over the years that might include some additional references. Yeah.
I have another comment and maybe a suggestion for Loïc the next time he gives this talk. when you've looked at group type and Fournier forgeries for years and years and years, all you have to do is glance at them and you know it's a forgery. It just has a sense that it's wrong. The shade of the color is wrong.
Yeah.
You pick up the funniness of the design. And what I'd like to see Loïc add to this talk is to actually go on Delcamp live, okay, and pick a French colony and go into that French, pick New Caledonia. Okay, there's a good one. And just go in and start looking at the stamps and see how many Fournier forgeries he finds. It's amazing. It's frightening. Just as he says, they're out there. And,
Yeah.
and what if, I can also tell the Fournier Serres first issues of France. I've seen those and I've handled those and looked at them carefully when I did expertising for the APS. And again, there's just a sense and a feel about them. And I've seen those on Delcamp, being sold as genuine. So, it's frightening, the numbers of these things.
Yeah, Spink last year sold some blocks from, I don't know if it was Madagascar or Anjouan, some of those, Indian Ocean colonies, and they had a series of blocks of 4, and the perforation was obvious, misaligned. So that's obviously Fournier, and I know that Stefan and I we send them little email and say, hey, you're putting this for sale and asking a pretty high starting price, but those are fake. And then their response was pretty much like, well, people should know, and there's a picture, there's a scan of it, so it's not like we're hiding it. So, and I was like, what?
I'm surprised they did that. That's
yeah, we are shocked, but I think who bought them? There was a couple of other nice, piece and varieties from Madagascar on that same lot, and it obviously won for a good amount of money. And I don't know what whoever bought it is going to do with the block of 4, but yeah, those are Fournier definitively. But that's a good idea. We can do a little live demo. Oh.
Yeah, no, it's bound to work. Every time I try it, it works.
Oh yes, yeah.
You go into a value range of, pardon me, $5 to $50, okay, and you're in that value range, and the Fourniers start coming out.
Yeah. And we I mean, both you and I look at the group type mostly, but what about all of the other countries?
That's right. That's
Fournier
right.
did the same, and so it's mind-boggling, the volume of those forgeries that you find today on auction sites, because I mean, some people might know, but most people probably just didn't bother. They got a stamp collection from grandparents or somebody who might have bought them not knowing or knowingly, but then that information is lost, and then those stamps go on the market today. People try to make some money out of it, and you just have a lot of fakes that are being recycled through the auction site. That's painful. John?
Yeah, did Fournier make the same amount of forgeries for each colonies, or were there some that he was more prolific about? I mean, I find that Moali, most of them seem to be forgeries, and I very rarely see them for Indochina, for example.
That's a good question. He made a lot of them, that's for sure. Did he make the same amount for each? I don't know. He might have tried to do what was asked by the market. So maybe French colony was a popular, topic. I don't know. But I mean, the Union Philatelic de Genève was able to put, together those 480 catalogs, reference albums, and they covered all of the countries, and they had enough stamps in the inventory that was left to fill those albums, with not necessarily always the same value or the exact same stamp, but across all of the series, they were able to. So I would say, just print and print and print and and see what sells. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has ever seen some, if he, the books from his company, his firm, and some degree of accounting and what he would sell, but having 10,000 customers across the world and reps, sales rep in 23 countries, you probably sell a lot of material. That's a big, I mean the value of the inventory that was left, years after his death was mind-boggling. So that's certainly thousands and thousands of stamps. Because I mean the Philatelic made those albums, but they still destroyed a lot of material after that. That was burnt. So you can imagine the hundreds of thousands of vignettes and stamps that they had. Volume-wise, did he make more of one country or another? I have no idea. That would be another good area of research for somebody else.
Anyone else?
Everybody to your albums and stock books and collection pages and go and check.
All right. If there isn't, I am going to remind everyone that we are not having a meeting at the end of August, but we'll be back at the end of September. We have programs for September, October, and November. We will skip December because of the holidays. All right. So I'm stopping the recording.